This is the first of a series of environmental programs that the group is organizing, and we'll have through the year. The next one is in October 30th. It'll be on the importance of trees. That won't be the exact title, but that's the idea of it. Anyway, it's Mount Pleasant CAC, the Pleasantville CAC, the Garden Club, and the Environmental Advisory Council in Briarcliff. And we are fortunate tonight to have Harrison Nesbitt, Community Adaptation Program Manager at Groundwork Hudson Valley in Yonkers. He'll speak on the subject of nature-based solutions to flooding and stormwater capture. Please put your cell phones to silent and enjoy the presentation. He has said that he would take questions. It's going to be a very informal program. You can raise your hand and he'll answer your questions through the program. And how long?
That's perfect.
So
Yeah, we'll see, right?
Yeah, smooth. Anything, if you just raise your hand first.
This
No
is for
yelling.
3 hours, right?
No. No, we have to be out of the library by 8 o'clock, so we have a time limit. But thank you all for coming out. We're excited about our presentations there.
Thanks, Josie. I guess first, should I turn off some lights, or can everyone see the screen okay?
Should I'll
I can also, yeah, she said just play around with the ones in the back, just so folks can see the screen.
It's pretty good.
Super. Well, thanks, Josie, Helen, and the CAC team for having me tonight. Thank you all for showing up on a way too hot Tuesday in September, but there you go.
There's no climate change.
I'm happy to keep this I'm happy to keep this fairly informal. I feel as if some of you may have seen some of this presentation before, so I've got some stuff at the end, but raise your hands throughout. You're not going to knock me off my script, and I want to make sure that saying what's interesting and relevant for you all, and I hope it's you find it informative. Briefly, again, my name is Harrison Nesbitt. I'm the Community Adaptation Program Manager at Groundwork Hudson Valley. We're an environmental nonprofit based in Yonkers, New York, but we do a lot of work throughout southern Westchester within the Sawmill River watershed. And my work is essentially building out climate resilience plans in Yonkers and then helping to steward the Sawmill River Coalition within the watershed. So here's a little agenda for tonight. I was thinking tell you a little bit more about the organization, about our role within the Sawmill River historically, and then do a deep dive into a recent report we did on nature-based solutions for a few sites within the Sawmill River watershed. And then, in case folks are getting tired or you've seen some of it before, I've got some cool new stuff that we've been doing in Yonkers. All of this is green stormwater infrastructure related. When I say green infrastructure, sort of nature-based solutions is the big model, which is really thinking about how water moves through landscapes naturally, how we can go back to that to address flooding concerns. And when I'm talking about green infrastructure or green stormwater infrastructure, I'm referencing rain gardens, bioswales, extended tree beds. So different ways of thinking about how water is channeled through environments and how you can detain or retain stormwater. And again, just ask questions. So Groundwork Hudson Valley has been around since 2001. We were opened up to do the daylighting of the Sawmill River in Yonkers. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with daylighting, but that's finding streams that have been kind of funneled underground and piped and opening them back up. So literally bringing daylight back to them. The Yonkers Metro North Station used to have a huge parking lot in front of it, Larkin Plaza. It often dealt with a ton of flooding and combined sewer overflow events, so raw sewage being dumped directly into the Hudson River. And the organization worked with the Army Corps of Engineers to daylight it, and it's now a pretty great park right in downtown Yonkers, and has helped with flooding and bringing back restore the eel population down there, which travels from down Sawmill and into the Sargasso Sea. And
Any shad going up there?
I have not seen any shad, sir, but I will keep an eye out. The organization has three arms: sustainability education. We have a science bars that some of you may have seen that's open to the public on weekends in the summer. It's sort of a living laboratory off the grid in Yonkers. that's complete with an aquaponic garden. So we donate hundreds of pounds of food per year to local food pantries. We have a youth leadership team, or our green team. So that's 30 youth from Yonkers Public Schools who plant trees, remove invasives, and table at community events throughout the summer, and are paid an hourly wage for that work, which is pretty terrific. And they're gaining sort of leadership skills throughout that. And then the community adaptation program, which I lead. So apart from our river work, I thought I'd give you guys a little preview of the other programs that we have. We do a lot of work with local institutions and businesses, but we also work very closely with residents in Yonkers. Last year when I joined, I established a working group model. So we recruit local Yonkers residents to learn about specific climate issues and pay them an hourly wage to learn about them and help us implement some demonstration projects. A couple ones that we're really proud of is the tree inventory. We developed a mobile app for folks to inventory street trees in Yonkers. No street tree inventory exists in Yonkers, and that's super important because we want to make sure that we know where trees are and where trees aren't, and we want to know what species of trees we have. If there's ever a blight, we want to make sure that there's a diversity of trees, and we also want to work with the city to make sure that they're planting the right locations, the right species. Trees are also really important in this context because they help to absorb stormwater. And there's also other co-benefits, you might hear me use that word often, of providing shade to folks and lowering ambient temperatures during extreme heat events. So street trees are really, really important tools, and they also just help with the aesthetics of a neighborhood. So this is just a few folks. You can see me taking a picture of one in the back, inventorying trees. All of these green dots represent a single tree. And I should upload this photo. We've now inventoried over 2,000 trees and worked with over 50 residents to do that.
Harris?
Yes.
What software do you use for that?
Yeah, great question. So we use, ArcGIS has a program called Field Maps.
Okay.
And we pair that with Survey 123. And they work hand in hand. So you download both apps, but they switch automatically. What I have noticed, and this is uncomfortable for some people in the room, is young people catch it like that. They're really good. They inventory a tree in 3.5, 4 minutes. But what's great is it's a very intergenerational group, so we often pair younger folks with folks who are pre-cell phone, and it's a really awesome experience where they work with the cell phone, and the other folk will do some of the input, helping to identify the tree and everything else. It does give you this syndrome, though, that you cannot pass a street tree without helping to identify it. So that's a kind of a fun little quirk that I've seen people develop. We also have an air quality monitor network in Southwest Yonkers. So we have 10 fixed air quality monitors throughout Yonkers. And they get measurements on particulate matter and other pollutants and some gas-based pollutants that are known to negatively impact human health. So we know that particulate matter are very fine particles that are released whenever there's combustion. And these particles are so small, like finer than human hair, and can be inhaled very easily, and can cause asthma and can amplify heart conditions, and has started to be associated with dementia and Alzheimer's as well, because it gets into your bloodstream and into its trap. So it's a really important thing that we're beginning to track, and we're working with a really cool partner up in Boston who's doing our analysis. We're really looking right now at the wastewater treatment plant in Yonkers and looking at the emissions from that very old building. And we're also doing a study on the relationship between extreme heat and air and particulate pollution to see if there's some sort of relationship between those two. Yes, sir.
Can you break that down by seasonal figures? Specifically, I'm curious when you have seen any seasonal effect of these leaf blowers, for instance, with the particular piece of property.
That's a great question. So the gentleman in the back was asking about seasonal differences in air quality, and we do break it down quarterly. Air quality is generally worse in the summer. You can often assume that during heat waves, air pollution is quite poor because there's less wind, so pollutants settle and concentrate. So we often tell folks that to check the air quality index during heat waves. And to your question about leaf blowers, I don't think it's too difficult to say if we see an exact correlation there, but one study that we did find that was quite interesting is we had a control of one of our air quality monitors in sort of a low-income neighborhood in Yonkers without many street trees that was quite dense, and another one in a very, like a historically affluent neighborhood. We found that the air quality there was a bit worse when we looked at PM10, which is the sort of larger version of the particulate matter, and we think that's because of landscaping. So leaf blowers, lawn mowers, things going off in that sort. And we also see a rise in PM10 during the winter, and we think that's contributed to salt on the roads, getting blown up and whisked around. Yeah. And it's also important to remember with air quality that sometimes when we see huge spikes, that's from global events. PM10 spiked hugely for a couple weeks in March of this year, and that was from a sandstorm in the Middle East. So.
Here?
Yes, yeah, sand will travel.
A lot of pollution from Canadian wildfire.
And a lot of pollution from Canadian wildfires, that's right. And what we actually see is, and then I'll get off air quality, because that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. But we do see a lot of pollution, wildfires from far away, gets a little wonky, but can often be worse for our health than wildfires closer down, because they oxidize, and there's chemical reactions that happen in the air that actually make them quite poor for our health. We can talk more about that. And then this was the daylighting that I had mentioned. This is it's looking even better now. This is the daylighting of the Selma River. And our role here is Selma River is a coalition, is a partnership between nonprofits, municipalities, and businesses that was formed in 2001 with an idea of revitalizing the Selma River, which used to be the dirtiest tributary into the Hudson River. And we help organize public engagement events and bring together various stakeholders. So we're really proud of this one, and over the last 20 years, we've brought on public officials from Westchester County, 12 watershed municipalities to promote adequate planning and restoration projects. And that includes getting volunteers to help clean riverbanks, remove invasive vines, plant native trees, and monitor water quality. And then since 2019, we've kind of walked away from doing that, just that on the ground work to developing more reports, which we're all really excited with. And these offer more opportunities for capital projects. And it's also allowed us to collaborate with some pretty great organizations, including the Center for the Urban River at BZAC, to gather more data on water quality. The report, but I'm really gonna focus on that report tonight and one other. And then our river stewardship continues. We run the Great Selma River Cleanup. That's been going on for 17 years now. We have some folks in the room who are really awesome and come out every year to help out with some of our sites. And the green team is always here to assist different CACs. If y'all need tools or help at a cleanup event, give us a call, and some of our green teamers can come and help you out, so don't be shy. Some photos from the Great Selma River Cleanup. There's, I think it's Josie. One of the things that we've seen is there's less trash. So I think we're actually starting to try to think about, do we want to turn the Great Selma River Cleanup into a planting opportunity? Do we want to find other sites? So do stay in touch. If there are areas or restoration areas along the Selma River that you think are not getting the attention that they deserve, please get in touch with us, because our sites are starting to look good. Don't look at that couch. That couch is down in Yonkers. Yonkers still gets it. Okay, now moving more into the sort of nature-based solutions report and how we arrived here. So this is a report that we did with the New School Urban Systems Lab, where they did hydrodynamic flood mapping for the entire Selma River watershed. And this was featured in this report called Flood Risk Modeling that's available on our website, so I can follow up with that report. They used a modeling tool that's really popular in the UK called CityCat to model 1 hour baseline simulations. I say 1%, 10% annual storm, so a 10-year or 100-year storm. We're using those really as, it's like defined language, but the associations in reality don't really make as much sense as they used to. Those percentages are no longer that accurate, but they're a helpful baseline because it's sort of a standardized measurement. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, so we had Floyd in '95,
Mhm.
and we had Irene in 2011.
Mhm.
Is it, or is it Ida? And we had
Ida was
Ida
2022.
2022. So those were basically all 100-year floods.
Yes, or greater. Yeah.
Or greater. Actually, one was a 500-year flood, I believe, and we had 3 of them in the last 30 years.
That's helpful.
So that's why
context.
you don't understand that this
Exactly.
100-year flood language works anymore.
Exactly. So those need to be redefined, but for now, we're still using those because that's what everyone else is using. So it's like we can't change the language yet until that comes at a higher level. And I just want to take a minute to say that this is the flood model. The blue represents where flooding is occurring. The deeper the blue, the deeper the flooding. There's also photos that community members sent us. And I want to encourage everyone, if you see a flooding when you're on the Sawmill River or when you're in a park, take that picture and send it to us. We're a bank for your photos, and we promise to use them in reports, to use them to gain funding. It's really, really critical. And one thing that we really found out from this site is we need to do, as someone who works in the climate field, we need to do a much better job with storytelling generally. And we need to personalize these issues, and we need to make them feel real. When I just show someone this map, that's a cool image for a t-shirt, but it's not gonna make it's not gonna resonate with people emotionally, where a photo does. So I really encourage folks when I come to these, if you see it, just take a photo, send it to me. Worst comes to worst, I'll put it in my trash and say thank you. And you'll never know, so thank you for those.
Do you have access to a drone?
We do have access to a drone, so.
Let me see the better way to do it.
But we can't fly drones over the highway. We can get into that. One thing that we noticed is that when seen comparative to the FEMA flood models, you all are familiar with FEMA flood models, what our report showed is that the FEMA flood models didn't really account for flooding in tributaries. A lot of the Nannyhagen Brook, Betulieres Brook and Hastings on Hudson, Rum Brook and Greenberg were not represented in those models. So we're really happy we did this because that does really help to think about where nature-based solutions might work. I should caveat some of this with green infrastructure alone isn't the tool. We need to think comprehensively about a full toolkit. You know, we still need to do big gray construction, raising bridges, widening culverts, that kind of thing, but we need to pair that with green infrastructure. We need to pair that with nature-based solutions. And those are really better equipped for places with less stream flow. So tributaries are a really ideal place to do that. So we really wanted to focus this report that I'm going to talk to you about on those tributaries. Do folks have any other questions about this modeling before I go? Super. This is all, I'll share this report after, and this is publicly available, so you can search it out. This is a really cool thing that I just wanted to show you guys. We were able to do more in-depth flood modeling in Yonkers because it was a more defined area, but we're working with the Urban Systems Lab now to do some flood simulations so you can really see how it moves through an area and do stream flow analysis, which is quite cool. And that's also helpful when we're thinking about where to place rain gardens and these kind of smaller interventions, you know, catching it in situ before it gets, you know, to the end where it's too deep. This is just kind of another image of some flood modeling that we've done that takes into account what green infrastructure could do in one area of Yonkers. Cool. So that report was funded by the one that I was just mentioning, by the Hudson River Estuary Program and Westchester legislators. And following that tour, there was this, this movement to be like, great, there's a problem. Now, what are we going to do about it? So we started having these flood site tours to kind of go to the sites where we saw, hey, this is a real issue on the Sawmill River. So we brought together various members of the Sawmill advisory board, so different Westchester legislators, city council members, town engineers, and other representatives for different municipalities, as well as Kristen Gillibrand's office came down for a tour as well. And this was all in anticipation of the Resilient New York report for the Sawmill River watershed. So the state has been doing these Resilient New York reports for different rivers within New York. and they were prepping one for the Sawmill River. So we thought, okay, great, let's do a complementary report that focuses on the tributaries and the areas that they're likely not focusing on because they're just going to be referencing the FEMA flood maps. I'm telling the story in a funny way, but I hope you guys are following it. Back up a little bit to chat once more again about nature-based solutions. So again, we want to take a holistic approach when thinking about climate adaptation. And I think a good definition for nature-based solutions is that they mimic natural ecosystem functions, and the interventions that we recommend in this report are focusing on retaining stormwater and reducing inundation during heavy rainfall events that lead to riverine flooding like the ones that Michael was discussing. And we also want to say that like the Sawmill River is getting the attention it does is because it's like a pretty tame river. It flows pretty gently most of the year. It doesn't seem like it's cause for alarm. And then all of a sudden you get a huge rain event and hundreds of thousands of commuters can't get to work. And that's because the entire parkway and so many of those homes were built directly in the floodplain. It's also the southernmost tributary to the Hudson River, and it's in a super developed area. And what that has meant practically is that there's tons of invasive species along the Sawmill River. So not only did we build in the floodplain, but that riparian forest is a fancy word of just like, there's a forest that's next to a river of water-loving plants, so that when it, water-loving trees and plants, so when it floods, those trees absorb that water and can sit in that water. And most of those trees are gone. And what you're left with is Oriental bittersweet, Japanese knotweed, those vines that you see taking over all those trees as you drive down. And those contribute to erosion, which only makes the issues worse and is killing those trees that might otherwise help to absorb stormwater. And yeah, sir.
So, if, we're in a river plain, floodplain, and it's been very sort of wet seasonally for the past 5 years, and we're losing a lot of our native trees due to a couple different things, birch leaf disease, ash, hemlocks over and over,
Yeah.
plus the vines more or less taking over the river valley. Do you think that hydrocarbon pollution contributes to that because they're sucking in and converting, that to nitrogen and carbon, and then overtaking the trees, and eventually we wind up with a savanna that changes that whole program? Is there, you obviously bioengineering, you're doing more, I assume, native trees that are facultative and more mesic than upland, because it seems like that might be a trend. And earthworms, in our work, we noticed that we have a lot of sediment loading on slopes because of the earthworm populations. They're expanding exponentially without any, predators, whether that's because they're bioaccumulating heavy metals or whatever it is. But earthworms definitely seem to be contributing to the whole sediment loading and raising of, the floodplain.
Yeah, I unfortunately can't speak to too much of it. Those are really interesting, and I'll follow up with you afterwards to kind of hear more about what you're noticing. But yeah, I think it's all cumulative, right? And I think one thing that we're always desperate for a simple fix, and to your credit, everything is building on each other, right? And I think that's the best way to think about it. There's no panacea. There's no one way to solve this. And this is why the work that the Green Team does and the CAC is great, because unfortunately the best way to get rid of it is just to go out 3 or 4 times a year and remove it by hand and plant things that we know are going to work. It takes hard work. Yeah.
Rockwood Hall, I've been there this year, but they get goats, they fence them in, they eat all that stuff.
$7,000 a day.
Is that what it costs?
Yeah.
Go, rent those goats to.
$7,000 a day.
Fine for $35 a month.
Buy a bunch.
So you need to train the goats to be able to not only eat those plants but be able to digest them. So they're specially trained, and they're really and there's a lot of hoof diseases that come because we've been wanting to get some goats ourselves. Yeah, no, it's quite yeah, but we are looking at grants for goats. Goats are great because goats will just sit there and munch, and after a few years they will get rid of invasives. Yeah. and it brings crowds and it brings attention. You know, as I brought up storytelling earlier, goats are a great way to bring people to a site because it's a petting zoo. So goats are wonderful, but they are cost prohibitive. Yeah, so you'll see them in wealthier areas, yeah. The last thing I want to say is there are a lot of, unlike widening a culvert, there's a lot of co-benefits that come with nature-based solutions because you're supporting biodiversity, improving water quality, and providing more green space for residents, potentially. And they're also more adaptive. You know, when you build a culvert, you know exactly how much water is going to fit through it. When you build a nature-based solution, when you build a park, you know, this is a natural ecosystem that's going to change and be able to adapt. So I think it's always important when someone brings up a rain garden or something else to think about everything else that you're helping. You know, rain gardens thrive as pollinator gardens as well, or bring other bugs that help bring birds in. So think about it, challenge everyone, you know, just as we said, it's all cumulative. Adapting to the climate crisis is also additive for our life. It's generally going to bring better things, I think. And I don't know if this is not really the same for where we are now, but adding nature-based solutions to capital projects used to also strengthen proposals, but I don't know if that's still going to be the case, but we'll see. So in these next couple of slides, I'm just going to preview some of these solutions that we are portraying, because you're going to hear me bring up these words, but I think it's helpful to have sort of a diagram of what I'm mentioning. So this is a floodplain bench, so really just allowing, this is an idea of the riparian forest. You can see there's a diversity of trees, diversity of tree heights, and really what we're looking for here is reconnecting the floodplain. So the river needs a place to go, and you can do that by some grading, so making this area a little bit lower so that when the water does rise, it has a place to go. So often, you know, water has a memory, some people say, so you gotta know where that water has gone historically, and you wanna meet that water there. Sand seepage wetlands is another really cool one. This is closer to real, like just an engineering approach, but putting in different sediment and different media to help to slow water and allow for that water to infiltrate into the soil. You know, when you have hard, compact soil where you don't have a lot of trees, that water's just gonna run right off of it. So how can you slow water down and allow it to kind of fall in? When you slow water down, you also allow for sedimentation, which helps water quality and prevents as much stuff from getting clogged in drains. This is cool, riffle ponds. Riffle ponds are another way of slowing water down, so by adding, and riffle, just such a great word to say. Adding stones and everything, so what you're really allowing it to do is allow the water to rise and fall and rise and fall, and by you're aerating the water is helping to clean it, but that movement is also allowing for sediments to fall. You're slowing water down. And what you're doing is you're mimicking what a healthy river will look like. You look at an old healthy river, you're gonna see that there are places where water speeds up and water slows down. So we're really kind of thinking holistically about the movement of water. So after we did those flood site tours with elected officials and folks from the county, we went and we met with folks in the community. We thought about what the takeaways are, and we went to work with CACs like Mount Pleasant, and businesses and think about where are we gonna have support. You know, we don't wanna pitch these projects in areas where we have to force the people to get on board. Where is the support, and how do we meet people who have their hands raised? Because that's gonna be a really productive partnership. And as I mentioned, we wanted to focus on tributaries that would complement that report that the state has come out with. Again, another photo, this is by a resident in Hastings-on-Hudson. Took a great photo of what does the house look like after a flood, and he's far from the river. But this is all coming from a brook that not many people have ever heard of. Boutilliers Brook, has anyone been there?
What is it?
Boutilliers Brook. Yeah, floods tons of homes. So here's an aerial shot of that brook. There's kind of two forks, and then it goes into the Sawmill River, but as you can see, it goes through this really residential neighborhood, which is also a fun thing, because when you build in residential neighborhoods like this, we're gonna need folks who are helping to maintain some of these sites as well, so we wanted to find communities where we thought we might have that support. This is some photos from that site. As you can see, this is one of the outfalls. You can see it's fully overgrown with invasive plants. There's trash, there's a lot of erosion. It's just not in great shape. So of course, water, when it floods, water just rushes through, because there's nothing to slow it down, and when water rushes through, it just makes the erosion worse. When you get bad erosion, then you get trees falling in and more woody debris, and then those trap storm drains, and then once the storm drains are clogged, then you get flooding. So again, when you think about erosion, it's not just helping that lone deer who's got a hurt ankle, or that child who's out there. These are cool, I think. So up here from clockwise down, you have a regular stormwater map, the FEMA flood map, and then ours. And as you can see with ours at the bottom, that it shows it is much closer to what we're seeing on the ground. There are wider areas where we're seeing that flooding happening.
Is that FEMA map chronologically the same age?
Yes. Site plan of how the site is looking now. We spoke with residents. The bubbles on the bottom reflect sort of community concerns, and theirs was invasive species and erosion. And then here's our sort of portrayal of what we're seeing, which is adding a floodplain bench at the bottom, adding some log jams, so essentially using old logs to help both slow water and create also the habitat. And I brought up that, I pointed out those outfalls earlier because you all could see how nasty they were, and thinking about putting in a sort of conveyance system. So rather than water shooting out of those outfalls and falling down, how do we create a riffle pond? So rather than water coming out, it's actually entering this kind of cascading waterfall that immediately helps to start to clean that water. Yes?
Also, I think it was 2 slides before, you had a drainage pipe that went straight into the stream. Are you doing any work to have them be farther back so that they can spread out and also have plants to help filter them so they're not going directly?
Exactly. So I'm using this sort of when I say outfall, I'm talking about that.
Right, that's
So
what I'm
exactly. So
referring to.
adding that sort of adding this, essentially, a version of this underneath that stormwater pipe. So the water would come out and hit some stones and kind of cascade down.
Oh, so you're keeping the pipe in the same place, but you're
Yeah,
not-
we likely wouldn't move the pipe
Right, because it's too.
fixed to a sewer
Yeah,
line.
right,
Yeah.
okay. Interesting.
Another site that we wanted to mention, and all of these are sort of mentioned in a report if you all want to go through, is in Greenberg. But once again, I mentioned Runbrook. So again, we're focusing on this confluence area, how can we stem some of the flooding before it hits the Sawmill River? This is another big deal. We know that the county and the state are really invested in this area because there's this community Babbitt Court here, which has applied for FEMA buyout money for the past like 4 or 5 years now. Because when it rains, sometimes just a couple inches, homes get completely inundated. If you go to that neighborhood, you'll see homes jacked up on stilts. Yeah, it's a real issue. And part of that, you mentioned, sir, you know, what's happening, the ash borer disease. This was just an ash forest. And as most of you may know, ash trees are in big trouble right now. Not a good time to be an ash tree. And I brought up that tree inventory earlier otherwise, and I brought up tree diversity. Because what you get when you have these monocultures, when you have one tree, is that a whole forest can be gone. So the ash beetles made the trees weak, and then invasives has fully taken it over. So if you see this aerial drone, tons of dead trees throughout the area. Those dead trees are falling, clogging storm drains, and contributing to flooding. And it's a massive area. So this is a huge, so I know that a lot of folks are really interested in this because it's a big old green space that's not being used recreationally, nor is it being used as a climate buffer. So it presents a huge opportunity, but it's a major capital project. And once you can, I mean, the takeaway here is really a lot of flooding, a lot of water. But one thing I want to point out is, this is the FEMA flood map, and that's Runbrook, and it doesn't show any flooding, while ours does.
Do you have dimensions, depth dimensions and area dimensions?
Yeah, if you look at this, it says, I don't know offhand, but
That's
it's a
not
couple
real.
inches, yeah.
So that's probably why. You know, I say that's probably why there's a discrepancy, because they don't incorporate.
But the FEMA flood map's also incorporated, it's just not part of their,
Mhm.
it's just not recognized. on their maps for whatever reason. And we also know, it should be said that, private insurance companies are no longer are more often referencing other flood maps than FEMA as well.
Well, that's obvious.
Yeah,
Anything that they can do to raise your rates.
yeah, exactly.
Duh.
Another site cut from what we're seeing, dying ash trees, more invasive species. And what we're proposing, which is to really, there's a huge sort of opportunity here with the South County Trail and how many people use it. And to really add more funding there is a great opportunity for this municipality and for the county. And one new thing that we're presenting here, which I think is quite cool, is this hummock and hollow. So thinking about microtopography. So thinking about how can we bring mountains and how can we bring other things in, which help to mimic how the ecosystem wants to function, which would look quite nice, but it also, once again, is allowing water to not just rush through an area, but to start to pool and fall in. Yeah. It also should be mentioned that when you plant trees, when you plant more vegetation, that soil becomes spongier. It soaks in more water. If you have concrete, water is just gonna hit and run right past it. When you have a lawn, some water will be captured, but most is gonna run right off because that root structure is not that deep. So what you really want is dense, live, varied plant vegetation that's gonna soak up all of that water. And because this is already a park, you're supposed to have trees there. Yeah, Helen.
So one way to make those hummocks is to use those dead trees, right, is to move them into.
Yeah, spot on. So that's one thing that Biohabitats, which is an ecological restoration firm that came up with many of these solutions, wants to do is use some of those dead ash trees to create those log jams. I've heard from some folks that that's not always a great idea to do, but we're just putting it out there as an idea of how can you kind of use those in circularity in some fashion. Yeah, that's a great point.
Does that serve as housing for rodents?
Maybe a nice muskrat, yeah.
What are you asking about?
Housing for
No,
rodents?
no, you said does that.
Yeah, would that concept
Oh, the dead
represent a housing
tree?
opportunity for rodents?
Because they're leaving New York City.
It would.
I live in Brooklyn.
You want to think about that.
Okay, and now we're here.
Yeah.
We're down the road. We're in Michael's territory. Nanny Hagenbrook. A lot of people don't think about Nanny Hagenbrook either. I don't think it's going to be shown too much. And we've heard crazy stories of the flooding that happens in Water District Field that I'm sure many of you have experienced. And we love working with this team, so we're really pleased to be here. Thanks for being here. So this is one that we're really excited about, and I think it's also, not to gin up too much attention, but I think it's the rendering that we're also most excited about.
Oh, can I just say, Harrison?
Yes, please.
If you just realize, if you're driving down Broadway and you look over the soccer field opposite ShopRite, they have the football goalposts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In 2021, the goalposts were underwater completely, totally underwater.
Crossbar.
Pardon?
Crossbar, you mean the top one?
The top part of the goalpost. Yes, just so you understand how much water
Mm-hmm.
was there.
And this is the area that we're looking at. We think that the opportunity site is this area that Michael let us know was likely a former ice lake. And right now it's underutilized, and it's kind of this meadow that has some meadow attributes, but also tons of invasives, dying hemlock trees. You can't really approach the site, a lot of vines that are starting to take over. It's a site in transition.
There are maps in the county clerk's office that show a pond.
Yeah.
That's what the field is.
Really? I would love to see that, yeah. And it's also a highly visual site, and I think that there's a lot to gain from working on it. This is one where the FEMA flood maps, I think, actually do really align with ours, which is good. And that's partially because so many businesses, not only is this hurting the sort of recreational field, but we know that it's really hurting a lot of businesses. This is a big business corridor that is quite vulnerable to these storms. So if there's a way for us to divert more water into that field, It's a really great use of an underutilized area.
Beavers.
Yes, but I heard you guys moved to Beaver recently.
No, he went on his own accord.
He went on his own accord.
Yeah. No, we did not move him. I was monitoring him constantly.
We love beavers.
Yeah, he left on his own.
I don't
Claim
think,
somebody's hat.
No, I don't think so.
not much more to say here other than this is a trout stream, so I think that should be a consideration. People wanted to see that sort of restored, and that there's a variety of different invasives that are on the site. And this is the proposal. I think this is really fun because when we were chatting with folks, we thought that this would be a really cool educational opportunity. Sometimes when you put in a lot of capital money with taxpayer dollars and everything else, people want to know where it's going. And I think if we can tell a story about why the site, what the site is doing, it would gain more attention. You know, I love that y'all are here tonight, but how do you get people thinking about stormwater who don't want to think about stormwater? And how do you also build climate adaptive infrastructure that looks beautiful, that's really pretty, that allows on a bright sunny day for you just to take a walk through a meadow sounds delightful. And you know, kids playing soccer over here, you walk over that bench, walk around. And then when it rains, that walkway would be raised enough so that you could still use that site. And it would still kind of tell that story. And this would bolster biodiversity, maybe be a community location, and more than anything, it would help to reconnect that floodplain to a meadow.
What about mosquitoes?
So yeah, that's a great question. If you do it poorly, you get mosquitoes. But if you have a functioning ecosystem, like anything else, mosquito is a sign of an ecosystem that's not doing very well. So if it's draining properly and you have birds and you have other bugs around, mosquitoes should not be an issue.
Going back to that boardwalk, is that over the meadow or is it over the wetlands?
Yeah, great question. So that's one and the same. So the soccer field would be kind of over here. So this bridge goes from the soccer pitch over to that meadow. Does that help?
Which is not a wetland, or is it?
Which is not. It probably could be, but it's going to be used as a recreational facility. So we don't want to transition that into. I think we want to preserve that as a recreational space. But the area that we're proposing doing this would be this area across the stream.
The reason I ask is there's an application for a similar type of program at Pittsburgh Cemetery, where they want to build a boardwalk through a wetlands area, and I just wanted to understand how this engineering might be done without interfering with the function of the wetlands and creating any impacts on it.
Totally.
We'll talk later.
Please, and I should also sort of just note that we did not have enough money to do a deep survey of all of these sites before any of these come together. These are conceptual designs. These aren't construction designs by any means. We're still trying to get support from the county, funding from the county, to get enough funding to see what's possible to do a deep dive into all of these. But the engineers who came up with these interventions did visit each site, and they're making their best guesses. So this is a very high-level summary, and it's meant to get engagement. It's meant to look pretty, but this is the first step in a longer process. Well, thank you all. Yeah.
Oh, I was wondering if you're gonna mention the Trees for Tribs program in Hastings. That was such a big success in the brook. Like 350 trees and shrubs were planted. And so if you ever go off on exit 12 into Hastings and you see all these new trees on your right, that came about because of a lot of community volunteer work, and your youth came and spent many hours helping us plant that, and it's really thriving and it's exciting. And I don't know if you have any other insights, but we kind of left it on the problem of to maybe talk a little bit about the solution that was.
Yeah, no, thank you
Yeah.
for bringing that up, Kat. So Trees for Trips is a really wonderful program sponsored by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And they give free trees that love floodplains, saplings, hundreds of them, and we turn it into a community event. Find a site, it's approved by DEC, and we go out and plant. So we've done a number of them. We've done a couple in Hastings. I think that there's one here in Mount Pleasant that's beautiful and worth taking a look at. And we have one coming up that I can email you all about on October 11th in Chauncey Park. So yeah, if anyone, similarly, if you see a site that could use trees, let us know. If you see a site that needs vine removal, let us know. I do have a few more slides. I'm just transitioning away from this Westchester business to finish up in Yonkers unless we're tired. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the estuaries, the problem with the estuaries. Along the water streams, like in my backyard, I have a stream that goes into Kinsko Reservoir, American beech trees.
Yeah.
Really big. Is there a lot of problems with American beech along the summer?
I don't think that beech trees are found, or are often found along that close to the river. So I haven't noticed. I haven't noticed.
I know in Rockefeller, there are American beech trees, and I know
There are.
I have 36 of them in my backyard, and they have a water that are all on their way out.
And I love the thygus, yeah.
I thought they were all on the water.
No. Birch trees?
Beech, American beech trees.
Yeah, I didn't know that beech were found along streams in the summer. Typically those birches and those willows. Yeah.
What are these little cylinders that you see all along the Sawmill River Park, especially when you get
So that's vestiges from artifacts from a Trees for Trips where we put those little tubes under the saplings
Nothing seems to grow.
so that deer don't eat them. All the trees don't make it. This is why we plant so many of them. But they do, and it can take time. But during the Great Sawmill River cleanup this year at Mount Pleasant, we took a lot of tubes off. So again, it's not 100% success.
What is the tree that you use?
We plant a lot of birch trees and
Birch.
cottonwoods. Yeah, birch.
I see.
Yeah, fast-growing trees that love water. Yeah, and help with erosion because they've got very long roots. Yeah.
Harrison, in Ardsley, they did, and I'm just curious if this is an example of one of these improvements that can be made. They redid where the Irish Famine Park is, right on
Yeah,
the
War
Sawmill.
Memorial. Yeah.
Is that a type of, because they completely took that lake out, and I know it would get 4 or 5 feet, just with a few inches of rainwater in an hour, and the South County Trailway would be completely inundated. Is that one of those, what they've redone there, is that one of those fixes that you're talking about?
That's a great point. Yeah, so War Memorial Field used to be Woodland Dam, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they broke the dam, which is healthy for the river because you want water moving. When water is still in a dam, it collects nitrogen, you can get some algal blooms, but it also heats up the water. So when water is released, it hurts downstream fish populations. So it's good to keep that water moving. And the project that you're referencing is, yeah, that's a nature-based solution. I think that would be a dream project for something that we'd want to do. And essentially what they did is they got rid of the dam and they restored the floodplain. If you go, it's a really beautiful site, and I think it's a great way to experience what that kind of climate-adapted infrastructure can look like. On a sunny day, it's a beautiful place.
Have things improved since they put that in? Have there been any sort of?
I can't
contacts?
speak to that, but I would assume so.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's improved the flooding in that area at all.
Yeah, that's a good thing for me to follow up on. The county, yeah.
A question related to sea level rise, intrusion, and the water table.
Mhm.
But can you comment on what's happening in the southern, Westchester, Soho section related to that? Is the Hudson River rising?
The Hudson River is rising. It's risen 2 inches since in the past 30 years. Yeah, so the Hudson River is rising.
So there's going to be intrusion?
Likely, yeah. Yeah, there's going to be, and it's going to change the composition of the salinity. Yeah, I can't speak too in depth about that, but yes, the Hudson River is rising. But that's a good, getting into the Hudson River, I think, is a good segue into, are folks okay if I keep yapping on a little bit about Yonkers? I'll be quick, Yonkers has a problem like most cities, older cities in the Northeast, called combined sewer overflow.
Yep.
These show that essentially a combined sewer system is when you have water from your home, water from businesses, the same drain as a storm drain. So on a rainy day, the wastewater treatment plant gets overwhelmed very quickly, and they shut off the valve, and water discharges directly into the river. That's why you shouldn't fish, you shouldn't swim in the Hudson River 48 hours after a rainstorm. And you get big fish die-offs as well. So it's a really big issue. So yeah, when we think about green infrastructure in the urban context, this is really what we're trying to prevent. It's just another image. And it's not much. It's really just every time it rains. I mean, 1/10 of an inch will set off a CSO event. And that's raw sewage, that's chemicals from your car, everything. So we're working on building out more green infrastructure in Yonkers. So we worked with Urban Systems Lab again to do a stream flow analysis. If you want to hear more about this, we'd be happy to follow up with it, but it's a really great report. And I think it was really valuable to do a feasibility report like this, because you understand where is it cost effective and where is it practical to build out green infrastructure in an urban environment, because it's not as simple as it seems. And essentially, there's a really small scale thing, which is just advocating that more people in their yards, teaching them how to build their own rain gardens, and capturing as much water as we can on site is something that we're beginning to focus on, because building in the right of way it can be difficult. Yeah.
The slide that you showed represents one more back. One more? Yeah. This is exactly the problem I'm having with one of my real estate properties in Yonkers. Exactly this on Warburton Avenue.
Yeah.
And what I have to do now is I removed the main sewer trap, and I built like a culvert, and when heavy rains come, I routed that water right out the back of the building, back of my building. And I had no clue on alternatives, but this is something all along Warburton Avenue, which borders the Hudson River in Yonkers. We are inundated with this problem.
Yeah.
And the city of Yonkers is, they don't know what to, and they're continuing to build. They continue to build and feeding the single sewer line which catches stormwater and sewer. They're continuing to build.
And that's why, so this report is speaking to a lot of that and raising that issue.
But it's not stopping it.
No. Thought it'd be interesting just to kind of show you all some images of those sort of on-site green infrastructure that I was mentioning. This is a bioswale. You'll often see this presented in a linear fashion, oftentimes in parking lots, which is really smart. Parking lots, you get a lot of asphalt, you get a lot of, there's a lot of cars, heavy metals, other chemicals draining from them, oil. So it's really great to capture that. And there's often space enough to create these. So bioswales allow for when it rains, that parking lot drains into an area that can take those heavy metals rather than flowing directly into a storm drain. But it also allows you to plant trees and other native vegetation and help to cool down a parking lot, which absorbs and spreads a lot of heat. Rain gardens, these are unlike a bioswale, which sort of channels water and treats it linearly. A rain garden is often circular and concave, and really is just and often attached to downspouts or wherever else. There's another one in a parking lot, but you can often find these in people's homes. And then extended tree beds. You can go on and on about extended tree beds, but we plant tree beds. We plant trees in 4x4, 4 feet by 4 feet squares, which trees don't generally like. And what you'll see often is you'll see pavement ripping around a tree because those roots go under searching for more, when all you really need to do is just make them a little bit longer. They really do need about 8 feet or so. But more cities are starting to do something really interesting, which is these kind of subsurface networks. So maybe you don't have space for that amount of soil, but you can start to create underground substrate for those trees and permeable pavement. So that's another really great intervention. We also did a parking lots report this year. We found that parking lots account for 7% of all land in Yonkers. by adding green infrastructure to all of them, you would capture 21,000 gallons in 1 minute during a rainstorm, and that parking lots are 2 degrees hotter. That's not surface temperature, but like ambient temperature than other areas. So we're working now with private owners on building out green infrastructure in parking lots. And then I'll end on my last hopeful note, which is this April, we planted a microforest at a public school in Yonkers. A microforest is a dense planting of native trees. So we planted 372 trees in a 30 by 30 area, 52 different species. By my estimation, this is the highest diversity of trees in a 30 by 30 area in all of America. So go down to Yonkers, check it out. And in 20 years, it'll capture 3.7 million gallons of stormwater. And it's a really interesting comparison here where we're also kind of getting students engaged in this process. We had 80 people, both students, administrators, and just folks in the community show up at this planting event. I had an old man cry because he'd never planted a tree before, and he goes back and he takes pictures of it every day. So there's no trash in this microforest, no one's damaging it, and it's because they know where it came from and they were part of building it. So I think microforests are a really wonderful idea to provide cooling, capture stormwater, promote biodiversity, but also get people engaged in this work and be a part of it. It's a really cool thing. This is what it's looking like now. It's already much, much bigger. Had the mayor show up. It was a great little event. So thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Are there sites other than Groundworks where we can research those types of mitigation for, can you recommend anything?
So for like the building out a rain garden or that sort of thing?
Rain garden, parking lots, how do we research on it to give a better understanding?
Yeah. We have a lot of these reports on our website, so you can check out some of these reports and then see where the research takes you. Yeah, I mean, I think that our goal moving ahead is we're doing a lot of reports, we're doing a lot of writing, because writing is cheap, I guess. But we are really trying to work on implementing a lot of these.
And then if property owners have questions, like who do they reach out to?
I'm a contact. Yeah.
We have you on tape.
Yeah, Helen.
There's two main places. Westchester County's website has a whole thing about rain gardens. They used to have a brochure online in print, which actually gave a nice diagram of a typical rain garden, and that's disappeared. But also the Westchester Community College Native Plant Center is a good resource.
That's great. Thank you for bringing that up. And I will say, like, this is a little silly, but like this old house, which is like a show that's been around for a while, has an incredible video on how to build your own rain garden that like they make really practical. So yeah, I wouldn't miss just going on YouTube and watching some videos on what people have done. And I would also say, like, this is always an experiment, and this is like what I said with the microforest as well, of like, just try to do it. And there's so many different ways. There's no single way to build it.
So, generally speaking, I think it's fabulous, the work that you're doing in terms of restoration and biofiltration. To me, it just seems that we're reaching a tipping point with the limits of, engineering, civil and physical engineering, and this is where the bioengineering it's just simply about biomass versus infrastructure. So that's why maybe our hydraulic cycle is so out of whack. There's just simply not enough ecological functioning plant life, despite pollinator pathways and all the efforts we make in natural landscaping, native plants. We still have the worst cultural practices in terms of landscaping generally, because we do consider the lawn part of permeable space, which you mentioned still is problematic, right? So if 25% of your property is infrastructure, but 50% of your property is lawn and maybe 5 to 20% of biomass, is it any wonder that we have
No, that's a
habitat
great point. I
problems
think
and
that there's
loss of
a
insects?
movement right now for more native meadows in your front yard. So one project that I'm working on is policy proposals in Yonkers to allow for native meadows. Right now, they're seen as like sort of unsightly to grow out your yard. So we're working on policies to encourage folks to have those, restoring to a more native habitat and get rid of that sort of unfortunate, like that nice white picket fence lawn.
Manicured is the word.
Manicured, yeah, thank you.
You know, just to